Hi, I'm Eli Fosl and I'm a PeaceCaster. I had the pleasure of interviewing Stephen Prothero at the 2008 Festival of Faiths. Stephen Prothero is a religious professor at Boston University and the author of Religious Literacy, What Every American Needs to Know and Doesn't. I interviewed Stephen Prothero after his performance at the Festival of Faiths on November 12th, 2008. Mr. Prothero, I'm a 14-year-old with the PeaceCasters program, and I'd just like to ask you a few questions about your work. The first question is, what do you think is really important to kids like me and the other PeaceCasters about the work that you do?
Great question. I think that a lot of people who are grown-ups now, when they were your age, they grew up without really knowing anything at all about religion, and to some extent, not about their own religion, but especially about religions of other people. And so I think what's important about my work for kids is the challenge to say, why don't you go out and learn something about Islam, learn something about Buddhism and Hinduism, and sort of appreciate the differences in the world by understanding some of the differences between what might be your own faith and the faith of other people.
And your book, Religious Literacy, do you think it's a book that any kid my age would be able to read?
I don't know. I had a complaint last night that had too many big words in it, so I don't think it is too sophisticated for kids, but it is written more for adults. But there is a section in the back that is a dictionary of religious literacy, and I think that dictionary is really good for any age in terms of looking up one paragraph or something on some term that you might encounter in Islam or you might encounter in Judaism that you don't understand.
All right, cool. Recently there have been many misconceptions of Islam in our society. And how do you think that that is affecting the youth, and how do you think that your work prevents that from happening?
That's a great question. We've had, ever since 9/11, there's been a big conversation about Islam in the United States, but not so much understanding about Islam. There's sort of been these two kind of political sides of Islam as a religion of war, Islam as a religion of peace. And I'm not so hopeful at this point that we're having a much better conversation than that, but I think as more and more kids and as more and more adults start to learn about Islam and read the Quran and talk to friends of theirs who happen to be Muslims, I'm hopeful that we'll learn more and more about it. It's certainly imperative in terms of when you look at the world situation and you look at Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and the United States, where Islam is probably the fastest growing religion here. It's important to know something about it.
Right. Well, how do you think that religious understanding, as you put it in your book, could have had effects on the war in Iraq right now?
Well, I think when we went into Iraq, we really didn't understand much at all about the culture. We didn't speak the language, and we didn't get the religion. We particularly didn't get the divide between Sunnis and Shia, this kind of main division in Islam between these two types of Muslims that's been around for centuries. And we didn't understand the hostilities across those traditions, kind of like Protestant-Catholic divide was in Europe, say, a few hundred years ago. So I think that's a main thing that we didn't get when we went in there. I think more broadly what we didn't understand is how important religion is. I think we had this idea that if we offer democracy to these people, they'll take it and they'll want it. And we sort of thought that you can understand Iraq purely on the grounds of politics and economics. And I just don't think that's true in most countries in the world. Religion matters to a lot of people, and it matters in politics. And we really can't understand other countries unless we understand how religion functions there.
And just as a last question, what advice would you give any young people that are coming of age today?
Ooh, that's a big question. I would say to learn about the world. Learn about the world. And one way to learn about the world is by starting at home. Most kids, especially if they're living in a city like Louisville, there's people all around who are Hindus, who are Buddhists, who are Muslims, and encounter them, talk to them. Find out what makes them tick. Find out what's happening with Muslims during Ramadan or with Hindus during their festival of Diwali. So be curious about the world like you obviously are, and engage with it. That would be my advice.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Prothero.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
I enjoyed the conversation.